say how they inspire me and how they could inspire you. And so I would go to bed and never get to sleep on a night because I was formulating this plan in my mind. And whilst I'm formulating my plan in my mind, a word and a phrase kept coming, and it was wait and be still and know that I am God. And me being me, it gets pushed to the side and I'm still formulating my plan. However, it kept coming back, and then I was like, oh Lord, you're having a laugh. This does not fit in with what I would say. It doesn't fit in with my plan. And it was so funny actually, a couple of weeks ago when Brother Alexander was speaking, and he said, do you know what God will make God laugh? Our plans. And so Proverbs 16 says, we make our plans, but God has the last word, and indeed he has. I'm a handful and absolutely know it. But in the end I was reminded that it's not my plan or will, but it's his. So I'm hoping it blesses you today. My title for today will be still and know that I am God in the midst of your waiting season. It's a bit of a mouthful. I thought if I'm going to have to talk about this, I'm going to have to know what I'm talking about. So I looked up the word still, and it's a deep silence and a calm stillness. And biblically, the word waiting is an active verb, which indicates to wait, to be aware through all the senses of what's occurring around you and discerning the right time to do the next thing. So I tend to think the verse be still and know that I am God calls us to take time to pause and reflect. It reminds us that God is still in control no matter what happens in our lives, no matter the turmoil we're going through, or the length of our waiting season. So which women of the Bible did I choose to talk to you about? Eve. However, do you remember I said it's no longer my plan? Well, when my plan went flying out the window, so unfortunately did Eve. And I believe today the Lord wants me to talk about Sarah. You would never believe the amount of toing and froing and arguing with God. Really, Sarah? I know nothing about her. I don't particularly want to do that. However, we're with Sarah. And I kind of thought my prayer has to be more like Mary, who said, here I am, the servant of the Lord, let it be with me according to your will. Instead of all this argument that goes on between me and God, because I'm quite stubborn, I'm still learning. So for the sake of time, we're going to focus on two areas of Sarah's life where she had to go through a waiting season. One of these was quite short, but the other lasted 25 years. Was she still? Did she give full control to God during these periods? The answer is both yes and no. Before we get into this, let's go on a journey through Sarah's life, where she came from, her status in the community, and her faith in God. We meet Sarai, whose name meant princess, at the end of Genesis 10. Although she was the daughter of a wealthy Chaldean tribesman named Terah, and half-sister to Abram, she's introduced not as Terah's daughter, but as Abram's wife and Terah's daughter-in-law. Abram and Sarai began their lives in Ur of the Chaldeans, which is southern Iraq, in the shadow of the sacrificial, this is a mouthful, ziggurat of Ur. It was dedicated to the pagan moon at the time, which was called Sin. It was a godless society, full of idolatry, and they ended up moving with Terah to Haran, which actually wasn't much better. It was still godless and filled with idolatry. If we move a little further to Genesis 11:30, we see that Sarah was barren and had no child. We learned that during the talk on Mrs. Noah, that a woman's identity and standing in the community was dependent on how many sons she produced. In this ancient culture, it was shameful to be barren. She was deemed a failure and would have experienced great shame and ridicule. So what do we know? We know she was from a wealthy family. We know she was married to Abram, and she was barren. But did she have faith in God? Genesis 12:1-3 says, the Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. And all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. In faith, Abraham obeyed the call of God, and Sarah did also, by submitting to the leadership of her husband. And 1 Peter 3 kind of talks about that. She packed up the house and got everything ready. She left her friends, her family, her wealth, her possession to follow her husband to a land that they didn't know, but they knew that God would show them. In that culture, it was a big deal to leave your family. It was a breaking of ties, but they did it by faith. So in answer to the question, did she have faith? The answer was yes. In fact, she appeared in Hebrews 11, Hall of Fame, for her faith.
Right.
She had a permanent home. She left a permanent home to lead a nomadic lifestyle, which would have brought hardship, loneliness, and pain. They travelled to Canaan, and then the hill country to the east of Bethel, then towards Negev. There was a famine in the land, and Abraham went to Egypt, and we all know Egypt's a representation of the world. Was this a lack of faith? What's interesting is that Abraham trusted God with so many things, except it seems for his ability to provide in that situation and his ability to keep him safe because of the beauty of his wife. He was fearful and told a half-truth, which in actual fact is nothing less than a lie. His lie exposed both Sarai and the Egyptians to sin. The grace Abraham was most noted for was faith, yet he fell through in unbelief and distrust of the divine providence, even after God had appeared to him twice. He was unfaithful, but God was faithful. 2 Timothy 2:13 says, if we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot disown himself. So what happened? Long story short, she was taken into Pharaoh's harem, and she was 65 years old. What strikes me is, and this is my thought, so you can have your own thought on this. What strikes me is that I'm going to call her just Sarah. Sarah didn't sit back or play victim. I believe she took up the cause of her husband and took it straight to God. I imagine her on her knees saying, oh God, you took us from our land, our families. You promised to bless us. You promised to look after us, deliver us from our oppressors. I asked myself the question, was this when Sarah experienced God for herself? We know that God spoke to Abram, and Abram conveyed the message to Sarah, but could this have been a time when she intimately clung to God? We're not told how long she was in the harem. However, it was long enough for God to afflict Pharaoh and his house with great plagues. I'd suggest that during the season of waiting, in Pharaoh's harem, Sarah clung to God. I imagine that she would have prayed and petitioned him. She saw that God protected her when her husband failed to do so. I imagine her saying, oh God, I choose to trust in you. I choose to rest in you because you're a faithful God. We see her in tremendous peril, yet she didn't give up. We can also see her quiet, determined, still spirit cry out to God in the midst of her trying, in the midst of her trial. And I think she would have been saying something like, God, I believe in you. You're faithful. Genesis 15, 1-2 highlights the Lord's appearance to Abram in a vision. Abram questions the Lord, oh Lord, what will you give me, for I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. It's hard to imagine how Sarah felt if she stood alongside hearing Abraham say this to God. How much pain, guilt, and shame would she have felt? Sarah was a vital part of the story. The entire covenant promise hinged on her ability to have a child. I try to imagine Sarah every month hoping, praying, pleading for a child during the 50 years or so before the promise, and after the promise we initially for around 10 years or so see her faithfully waiting on God. I can imagine her excitement when she proclaimed, God said it, and we're going to have generations. God said we're going to have a child. I can also sympathise with her when menstruation came and the hope for that month had gone. Women in biblical times would go to the red tent during their menstrual cycle. One after another, I can imagine Sarah's friends getting pregnant and stopping coming to the tent. Month after month, another would stop coming. until finally Sarah stopped needing to go to the tent. Proverbs 13 says, "A hope deferred makes the heart sick." It seemed that all hope had gone. It seemed like it was too late. It seemed like God wasn't going to bring a child through Sarah. When you're hungry for something so intangible that at the core of your being, that unmet desire, there's no prescription for it. There's no prescription for a mate like that. Sarah understood that. She understood that longing so unfulfilled, that longing that hurts so deeply that there's nothing in the world that can satisfy it except God. She lived with a painful, unmet desire. I can see her on her knees in desperation, crying out, "Why, God? When, God?" She would have struggled with envy and bitterness over other people having babies. She'd given up hope because hope was too painful. She was broken and she was hurt. In the depths of her despair, do you know what Sarah did? She didn't curl up in a ball and have a pity party, but neither did she wait on God. I can imagine her saying, "God, I know," I think she's probably a bit like me in this actually, "God, I know how you have a plan, but it didn't work. I'll help you out. I know you spoke the world into existence, but my problem's too big. It's too late. I really don't think you understand, God, how difficult it's been for me to get pregnant." With this, Sarah took control and presented her own plan. And it involved her giving her handmaiden Hagar to Abram. Normal to do that in the world at that time. So Sarah presented plan B to Abram. Do you notice though that they both take matters into their own hands? Did they consult God or share the blueprint of this plan? No. Now, so Genesis 16, 1-5 says, "Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, 'The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her.' Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took the Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. When she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, 'You're responsible for the wrong I'm suffering. I put my slave into your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me.'" That makes me hysterically laugh because it was her idea, and he's getting blamed. Plan B was to help God out, and we know how she got there. I don't know about you, but if you've ever been through a waiting season, it's painful, lonely, exhausting, and almost torturous. Have you noticed that it's at this moment in the wilderness that the lies of the enemy begin to bombard you? His lies are so targeted at your faith, your trust, and your hope in God. You got it wrong. You misheard. He's not going to do it for you. You're not important to him. Look how long he's made you wait. You may look to escape, but the temptation comes in. Well, what if I can? What if I can do it my way? Proverbs 3, 5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart." And that means with all that we have, we choose to trust him without looking through our eyes and seeing what we can see that way. Lean not unto your own understanding. Why? Because sometimes our minds just can't be trusted. We look at a situation and evaluate it based on our past feelings, our prejudices, our hormones, or what the world's telling us is truth. And the Bible clearly says, "Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path." It seems evident that Sarah wasn't trusting the Lord with all her heart, because if she was, she would have believed the promise where God said, "I am going to bring a child through you." She was on a slippery slope of faithlessness and self-dependency. She was leaning on her own understanding. She began to think she could do this on her own, that she could fix the situation, that she could fix him. I can hear the cogs in her heads turn as she began to think, I can get this for myself. I can get what I want, when I want, how I want it. This will be something we can all relate to. Yeah. The enemy wants us to settle for second best. He wants us to settle for what we can fix ourselves, rather than on what God can and will deliver in his perfect timing. Plan B didn't turn out well at all for Abraham and Sarah, but rather caused a major friction in their marriage. It caused a child to be born, Ishmael, that caused major turmoil in the world. As a result, this helping God out, which we're all tempted to do at times, set into motion a lot of drama and conflict within the home and the world. But there's one thing we can be sure of: God is faithful when we are faithless. God is faithful to his promises. God is faithful to his covenant. God is faithful to do what he said he will do.
Yes, amen.
Genesis 17:21 starts to highlight the fulfillment of what God promised Abraham and Sarah. It says, the Lord says, I will return next year and Sarah will have a son. Now by this point the way of women had ceased with Sarah, or in other words, she'd had menopause. Genesis 18:12 says, so Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I'm worn out and the Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? Chapter 18:14 is such a profound statement, which says, is anything too hard for the Lord? So we see his ongoing promise. Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness. However, Sarah, the one whose womb we're all dependent on, is watching on in the natural going, it's too late, it's over. But was there still a kernel of hope? Could it be? Is it too late? That wanted to believe, and when all's said and done, God performed a miracle. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Genesis 21 says, the Lord visited Sarah as he said, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Here's the thing. With God, his timetable is different to our timetable.
That's right.
His clock doesn't run according to human standard time.
That's right.
It's not the way his clock works. God's will and his ways may baffle and confuse us, but he is never late. He is always on his time.
That's right.
In the end, although Sarah fell to faithlessness and took her eyes off of God, who had the situation in control, he was faithful to his promise. All of us at some point in our lives will spend time in a waiting season. But how do we do that? What can we learn from Sarah? Isaiah 40:31 says, but they who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. How do we wait well? Number one. During your season of waiting, pray persistently. Become more aware of those around you who are in their waiting season, who might be waiting for medical results, healing, comfort, job, houses. As you become more aware of other people in their waiting season, your situation will seem less urgent. Interceding for others shifts your focus off yourself and onto others. Pray the heavens down. Don't take no for an answer. Prayer is us coming before God saying, Lord, this is too much. It hurts too bad. Lord, I'm scared. Lord, I can't do this. Lord, I'm not perfect. You made it, you can fix it. Jesus praised the persistent widow when he taught about prayer. He said, like the woman who banged heaven's door down until you get what you want, believe that your God is able. Prayer says to God, I know you can. I believe it and I receive it. Number two, embrace your waiting season and find beauty within it. Don't fall into the trap of self-pity. Ecclesiastes 3 highlights that there's a season for everything. For everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. Verse 11 says, He has made everything beautiful in His time.
Yes.
You know, you might not like your waiting season, but you've got a choice whether to become bitter in it or embrace it.
Right.
Your waiting season, it isn't a punishment, there's a purpose in it.
Right.
God could be preaching through you during your suffering. What Satan has intended for evil can be beautiful when put into God's hands. God's delays are not His denials. The pain might still be there, but God is your reward. The husband, the baby, the job isn't your reward. Jesus is.
Right.
Number 3, don't give up. God is in control. At some point in the midst of your waiting season, you might be tempted to give up. It's hard to wait and it can be frustrating, lonely, painful and long. We can choose whether to continue to wait on God's fulfillment of His promise, or we can give up. We can say, You said it and I'm believing for it, no matter how long it takes. Or you can say, It's taken too long, Lord. You're so silent, Lord. Where are you? Don't you understand? I can't do this. Don't you just love, though, how the Bible encourages us when we're at our most vulnerable? Galatians 6:9 doesn't mitigate the struggles of our waiting season, but it does encourage us in this truth. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up.
Right.
Don't let your heart grow weary, and don't give up and risk losing the promised harvest of your waiting season. Number 4. Remember way back at the beginning of our journey, the heading is Be Still and Know That I Am God, which causes us to pause and reflect and reminds us that God is in control. Well, like Sarah, we may be tempted to take control. I'm a dreadful one for taking control. In fact, one time someone said you're a control freak, and I was like, really? But actually I am, I have to say. So, like Sarah, we might be tempted to take control when in a lengthy waiting season. You may think you can do it better and move God out of the way because you can do it all by yourself. As we know, Sarah's plan caused jealousy and unnecessary heartache. She got weary and she forgot that God was in control. I'm sure we can all recall times when we've all made irrational decisions and come up with ill-thought-out plans. Have you ever noticed, though, that these decisions and plans tend to make the situation worse?
Yeah.
How do we overcome our desire to take control in this situation? We have to be still. Oftentimes during our waiting season, all we really need to do is be still. And the waiting season will burn off our desire to be in control and strengthen us to a surrendered faith that can move mountains. Number 5. Whilst in the midst of your waiting season, don't be tempted to stop believing what God can and will do,
Right.
what He has promised in His perfect time. Imagine Sarah, though, 25 years waiting for the promise. I can hardly wait 25 minutes. I can imagine the questions going through her head. It's been so long, God. Are you really going to work this out? Too old. It's too late. You can feel the quiet, lonely, isolating moments of deep desperation she would have had to endure. We need to be careful not to talk ourselves out of having the faith to remain in the waiting season where God is in control. It's all about faith. The enemy doesn't want your job, your husband, your money, your house, your dreams. He will use these things to attack you, but he wants your faith. Why? Well, our faith in God unlocks all His power in our lives, and the enemy has no chance against a power that was strong enough to raise Jesus from the dead.
Right.
So when you're in the midst of your waiting season, expect attacks from the enemy. He doesn't want your harvest, he wants your faith. So how do we overcome? We put on the shield of faith. That's why the Apostle Paul tells us in Ephesians 6:16, In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. It's in this season that you will develop the faith that says, I can't see the 50 churches with 1,000 in each, but I know you're working on it, God.
Right.
I haven't got the husband I'm waiting on yet, but I know you'll do it.
Right.
We don't have your baby yet, but you promise.
Amen.
I don't have my healing yet, but you are able.
Right.
We have to keep our eyes on Christ so that your faith can run deep in your heart,
Amen.
so that we'll not be consumed by our waiting season. There's no doubt that, like Sarah, will experience frustration, loneliness, heartache, desperation, but we need to keep our faith in God. If He said He will do it, He will do it
Right.
in His perfect time.
Right.
No matter what you're facing, take up your shield of faith and never put it down. And I'm going to end with Psalms 27:14. It says, wait patiently for the Lord.
Right.
Be brave and courageous, yet wait patiently for the Lord.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Sister Heather.